When you talk about school lunches, hey, I worked my way through high school. I don't know about you, but I worked since I was, before I was even 13 years old. I was picking berries in the fields before we had child labor laws that precluded that.
Republican Congressman Rich McCormack, wants your kids to go to work to fend for themselves rather than relying on a free lunch at school. Now, what sparked that statement was a question from CNN anchor Pamela Brown in regard to a new memo from the Trump administration regarding a freeze on federal grants and loans. Now that has led to a lot of chaos, people asking a lot of questions about what this means. But this was sent to various government agencies from the Office of Management and Budget. They announced the move in a 2-page memo, which said that all federal agencies would be forced to suspend payments. The only exception is for Medicare and Social Security, because that is the third rail of politics. These are incredibly popular programs, and if people stop getting their Social Security checks, it's probably gonna lead to a lot of rage. But here's the wording of the memo, which was written by acting OMB Director Matthew Vaith. The use of federal resources to advance Marxist equity, transgenderism, and Green New Deal social engineering policies is a waste of taxpayer dollars that does not improve the day-to-day lives of those we serve. But much is unclear about what this all means, okay? So for instance, the memo says that the funding pause, and this isn't an end to the grants entirely, right? This is just a 90-day pause to, I guess, look at where the money from the federal government is going, whether any of it's being wasted. That's the argument that's being used right now. But it specifically says that it does not include assistance provided directly to individuals. But it also doesn't clarify whether that includes money sent first to states or organizations and then provided to households. So there's a lot of questions about this. However, this does impact funding for the Democrats' climate and spending law, known as the Inflation Reduction Act. It also impacts the funding for the infrastructure bill, which of course passed in 2021. There's also a 90-day freeze on all foreign aid, with the exception of Israel, which we shared with you earlier on this show. But I don't know what to make of it yet, Cenk, because I don't know if it's gonna be successfully challenged. I don't know exactly how it's gonna impact federal agencies, but what are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, no, I'm totally against it. So let's break it down. First of all, Congress passed these laws. So if you are opposed to the spending, good news, there'll be another budget next year. And that's when you take up those issues and then you have that debate. And we might lose at this point because the Republicans have the White House, the House, and the Senate. But you do it through a regular process. You don't say Congress passed the law, but I don't feel like following it. That's not within the purview of the executive branch. But as we keep coming back to, really because the Democrats fired everything they had at Trump, but in totally clownish ways and at all the wrong times, they got no bullets left politically. So that means that Trump can just violate the law and there's really not much we could do about it, especially with the Supreme Court decision. So like, what are they gonna do, impeach him? So he could just break the law over and over and over again. And so here, it's a 90-day freeze. It doesn't affect money going to individuals. And there's a big blow up about Medicaid we'll get to in a sec. So Social Security, Medicare are fine. But it does, and of course, all foreign aid, except as Anna pointed out, Israel and Egypt, because Egypt has to deal with Israel. So, but let's note that things not going directly to individuals are all blocked for 90 days. Cancer research, and I could list you 100 things that you would think are totally worthy. Maybe some right-wingers would think, no, not worthy. And in fact, I put out a thing today on X and they were like, yeah, cancer research, who needs it? And I was like, I don't know, it feels like we need it. So anyways.
Well, okay, let me ask you something. I'm getting really sick of us funding the research and development for pharmaceutical companies, including cancer research. And then when a family member of ours gets sick, I have 2 family members with cancer right now. They're very close to me. So I'm going through it right now, okay? No cost savings, no nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, we get price gouged up the you know what.
Yeah.
So
So
anyway, I have soured on the notion that the American people are responsible to fund the research and development of these pharmaceutical companies. But anyway, that's just a side note. It's not a comment about this action overall.
But Anna, look, the correct answer to that isn't let's stop cancer research. The correct answer to that is if we are then giving that research to a corporation, we should get part of the profits of the corporation.
But we're not going to.
So, I mean, they keep talking about how, Trump is saying, I want an external revenue service. We're gonna charge other countries. It's not really accurate. Instead of charging our guys, we're gonna get rid of all income tax, but we need revenue otherwise. Well, it would be great revenue from these drug companies if we actually charge them for the research that we're giving to them. And normally that kind of investment is worth a lot of money, equity in their companies that the American people can get revenue from. But we never have a rational answer to things because corporations actually rule us all, and they rule the Democratic and Republican parties. So we're never gonna get that. Instead, we're just gonna give it away. But overall, there's a lot of things on that list that are very important to the American people. Let's also note for the record here that all the needs of the Israeli citizens are protected. The needs of the American citizens are not protected.
Well, they're more important than Americans, according to the US government, regardless of which political party is in charge. So just accept that and swallow it and be done with it.
And look, I think both sides are not happy about that, but all the politicians love it. But if you're a right winger, congrats, you got America's second. Yep. I hope we don't fall to third, okay? So, and that's Trump. That's not Biden, that's not any, that's Trump doing that, okay?
Yeah.
So overall, a lot of programs cut that we wouldn't agree with, but you can't freeze it without congressional approval, but he did.
Okay, so before I get to the legality of this, I do want to just comment on what you said about Democratic opposition and just how inept they are. Look, Democratic senators held a press conference in response to this today, and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer just reverted back to the same tired talking points that everyone is fatigued from. No one's buying. Oh, this is what Trump is doing to abide by Project 2025. Okay, listen, what are you gonna do about it? What are the Democrats gonna do about it? Okay, enough with the fear mongering. What's done is done. What is your plan? What is your plan? That's what I wanna know. No plan, they're inept. We're just gonna do a super sleepy, uncharismatic press conference about it and move on. Now let's get to the legality of it. According to Bobby Kogan, who's a federal budget expert at the Center for American Progress, which is left-leaning, he says that the president is generally allowed under the law to defer spending for a period of time, according to budget experts. To comply, though, Trump must make clear which budget accounts are frozen. And that's the issue with this two-page memo. It lacks specificity, and because of that, we're running into a bunch of issues. So it's not that Trump unilaterally decided to end federal funding or federal grants. He did do this pause, which, believe it or not, he has the right to do. It's just that he needs to provide specificity in regard to what he's doing and why he's doing it. And it's also worth noting that the OMB also says that the pause must be applied to the extent permissible under applicable law. Not a lot of people are reporting on that portion of the memo, but it's important to know it says that. Agencies must immediately report to the OMB any legally mandated actions or deadlines that arise while the pause remains in effect, it said. The temporary pause will provide the administration, quote, time to review agency programs and determine the best uses of the funding for those programs consistent with the law and the president's priorities. And so the agencies must submit detailed information to the OMB on all paused programs by February 10th. And look, I want to be fair and just note that while everyone is citing government programs that we think are important, right? School lunches, okay? Assistance for college students so they can actually go to college and afford it, like things like that. These are things that we like. We want taxpayer money to be used toward making the lives of American citizens better. But something that also gets a lot of funding, non-governmental organizations, think tanks, for instance. So I looked into this because I was curious, what are the top think tanks in regard to accepting federal government grants? get a load of this. I can't even believe this. So this is data from 2019 to 2023. Between those years, the Rand Corporation received $1.4 billion in grants from the federal government. Wilson Center, $51.7 million. Atlantic Council, over $8 million. Aspen Institute, $6.2 million. You get the point. Like, there is a lot of pork barrel spending. There are a lot of federal grants being given to either private nonprofits or private think tanks. And I think it's worth revisiting whether it makes sense to give all this money, taxpayer money, to these organizations.
So the Rand one is really strange because sometimes they're considered like almost a de facto governmental organization, but they aren't. So what the hell is that? So
they work with the military.
Yeah, and so of course it's more military pork is the real answer.
The Heritage Foundation also receives federal government grants.
Yeah, so look, the Aspen Institute might do good work, but they're like a very elitist organization. The Heritage Foundation is the guys who did Project 2025. Why are we giving them money? Why? And the Aspen Institute is filled to the rim with the richest people in the world. Why are we giving them money? So, and look, so if you want, and maybe there's a good reason, but we should do that during budgeting. Not during, hey, I came into office and I don't like these laws, so I'm just gonna, not obey them. I know it's a freeze. I know it theoretically goes back in 90 days, but does it? Because they're using the 90 days to so-called review those programs. And well, you can review those programs during budgeting, but if you're gonna review them and end them without congressional approval, you're clearly breaking the law. I don't know if the country cares, but you are, right? So, okay, now look, we criticize Schumer's response there. I'm not as tough on his response, but I do have a much better way to go on this, I think. So Schumer mentioned Project 2025. That's not unfair to mention because the head of the OMB is going to be the author of Project 2025, and Office of Management and Budget is critical, obviously, in spending. And this was one of the proposals in the Project 2025. So that's fair and fine. But what I would have done as well is given 2 or 3 specific examples, but not just in this press conference, much more importantly, every day pound away at cancer research, malaria treatment, by the way, child sex trafficking prevention abroad.
Yeah, focus on that.
Right?
Yeah.
That got blocked. So I thought you guys were against groomers, etc., school lunches, all these very popular programs. Now, if you want to take an extra step, which Schumer and the Democrats would never do, go, why is Trump funding Israel but not trying to prevent child sex trafficking?
That's very cute, Cenk.
I know, they would never ever do that, but it would be very effective, and they're just giving that away, of course. And so look, there's ways to fight back here that are effective. And you could also point out it's illegal without, I know this sounds funny, but hear me out, without flipping out over it. Because if you go in and you go, oh my God, what the hell is illegal? You're gonna do that like 28 times and you're gonna wear people out because he's gonna do a lot of illegal things. He's already done a couple of illegal things. So just strategically keep pointing out, not following the law. So I guess there goes rule of law, but it's okay. We Democrats prefer to be the party of rule of law and law and order. And apparently the Republicans think that laws don't matter. But whatever you do, you've gotta pound that message home with effective speakers and representatives.
And we don't have that on the left.
Yeah, good luck finding that in the Democratic Party.
All right, well, I'm gonna leave you with this final video because I think it's important to see what Congressman Rich McCormack had to say when asked about ending school lunches because of this federal grant freeze. Let's take a look.
Right now with this freeze, vulnerable populations could be directly impacted. And so my question to you, just to follow up with you, would you support getting rid of school lunch for vulnerable kids and breakfast and Head Start, for example, and getting rid of childhood cancer research? Do you support that? And what do you say to your constituents?
When you talk about school lunches, hey, I worked my way through high school. I don't know about you, but I worked since I was, before I was even 13 years old, I was picking berries in the fields before we had child labor laws that precluded that. I was a paper boy. And when I was in high school, I worked my entire way through. You're telling me that kids who stay at home, instead of going to work at Burger King and McDonald's during the summer, should stay at home and get their free lunch instead of going to work? I think we need to have a top-down review.
You're painting a
Think
lot
about
of these
where
kids
kids
with
need
a
to
broad
actually
brush.
How many people got their start in fast food restaurants when they were kids versus just giving a blanket rule that gives all kids lunches in high school who are capable of going out and actually getting a job and doing something that makes them have value, thinking about their future instead of thinking about how they're going to sponge off the government when they don't need to.
That guy looks like such a douchebag. Like, just on face alone, you would expect him to say that.
Yeah, I mean, look.
You want kids to go, you want elementary school kids to go out and pick freaking berries? I don't believe him for a minute, by the way.
Look, again, this is the problem with the Republican Party. If you think the majority of the country thinks kids need to go on an assembly line or maybe a coal plant mine and earn their lunches and breakfast when they're 13, and that they shouldn't be focused on their homework and their studying, but we should force them into factories and plants at that young age so they could earn their lunch. All right, but you're gonna be in the minority. That is not a popular position, and that is not a position I support at all. And so that's the problem with the right wing. They can't help but go massively extreme.
Yep.
Like if they picked some programs that were problematic and it's just like the advice I gave to the Democrats a minute ago, right? And the Republicans picked the worst of the programs and focused on them nonstop, they would be in a better position. They would become more popular. But once they get into popular programs, well, there's a reason why they're in the budget. We don't want to cut them, right? Because the American people like those programs.
Yeah.
So, but okay, go ahead, cut school lunches, see how it turns out for you.
So the group Democracy Forward had already challenged the Trump administration's freeze on federal grants, and a federal judge has stepped in. US District Court judge in Washington, D.C. has granted the request to pause this order. So our institutions are holding.
Yeah, no, that's really important and interesting. Like, can the courts effectively block the illegal things that he does? And so far right now, that's a really good positive piece of news that just broke during the show, that for the moment being, they are blocking that illegal order of Donald Trump's. Hopefully, if it gets to the Supreme Court doesn't say there are no laws anymore. So their whole point is to make sure that the laws are properly executed and enforced. If they just let go of that bare minimum, then we're in total lawless chaos. But for the moment being, the courts are holding.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.